We've been in Bari for a few days now. The weather has largely been pleasant, but occasionally unpredictable. A major reason for that is climate change. Europe is the fastest warming continent on the planet, and within Europe, Italy is among the worst affected countries. Heat waves and air pollution are becoming part of daily life. What are cities like Bari doing to combat this? What did the G7 leaders do on climate change? Our next report tells you. It's our last day in Bari, and we may have dodged a bullet because the weatherman has brought worrying news. Southern Italy is heading for a heat wave next week. What temperatures are we talking about? Up to 40 degrees Celsius in some parts. The culprit is something called an anticyclone in Africa. It's exactly what it sounds like. If a cyclone spins clockwise, an anticyclone spins the other way. This phenomenon has been around for centuries, but recently they've gotten longer and more intense. The reason? According to some researchers, climate change. Temperatures in Rome are expected to reach 34 degrees, in Sicily 42 degrees, and in northern Italy 33 degrees. Bari is a bit different from the rest of Italy. It's a coastal town, so the sea moderates the temperature. It is never too hot or too cold in Bari, yet they're not taking any chances. Behind me is one of the initiatives aimed at tackling one of the root causes of climate change: emissions. This is a cyber tree, or that's what they call it, a cyber tree that captures dust and emissions and purifies the air. Basically, it's a gigantic air purifier in the middle of the town. It was installed in June last year. It can purify up to 5,000 cubic meters of air every hour, thus benefiting around 10,000 people. But one purifier, no matter how big, won't be enough. We're talking about decades of pollution and emissions. The European Union makes up almost 17% of global emissions. But in the early 1900s, it made up more than 34%. So I'm afraid purifiers won't cut it. Another strategy is electric vehicles. On most streets of Bari, you see electric bikes like these. You can use mobile applications, pay money and rent them out. And we've also seen buses that use electricity and not diesel. And while this idea is commendable, we've also seen some very old cars and bikes plying on the streets. You can identify them by the deafening noise that they make, and their emissions much higher than your average car. Italy's air pollution is among the worst in Europe. Most Italians live in cities where the air quality is below WHO recommendations. In fact, air pollution is killing Italians. Around 80,000 deaths in this country are attributed to it every year. I'm sure old cars don't help. Around 40% of the cars in Italy are more than 15 years old. Last year, the government introduced a law to ban old diesel vehicles, but the backlash forced them to delay it. Another climate-related problem is heat waves. Italy is slowly turning into a heat wave hotspot. In the summers, the heat accounts for 2.4% of the excess deaths in Italy. These are deaths over and above the average mortality. Last year was especially bad. 2023 was the third hottest year on Italian records. The country reported 11 extreme weather events per day in 2023. Cities like Milan and Rome were seared by heat waves.
Very hot. It's really hot. And we didn't realize this is heat wave. This is the first time what we feel in here. It's just like we can't go out. And it's just so humid, not like before.
It's obviously better at the beach. At least you can get some sea air. In town, it's not possible to stay out there. It's too hot.
It was a hot topic at the G7 too. Many activists have accused these countries of double standards. The G7 members have agreed to phase out coal in the next decade, but this is an old promise packaged in new words. Plus, Italian energy giants featured heavily at the summit. Giorgia Meloni's position on the issue is also confusing. She told the G7 to put ideologies aside to fight climate change. Yet, she voted against a European Green Deal. So the G7 did not deliver much on climate change. Activists gathered at the media center in Bari to protest the lack of progress. Most of them belonged to Extinction Rebellion, a global climate advocacy group.
We call for this voice to be heard, that of the animals that are disappearing, of the biodiversity that is dying, and also of the people who are living in the front line of the eco-climate crisis, because international forums such as the G7 are not taking concrete action.
We want a future. We simply want a future. We in Extinction Rebellion do not place blame, but we want something to be done by the people who now have the power to do it.
We see such protests at every summit, but the world leaders don't seem to care. They fly in on private jets and personal planes, hold talks with energy bosses, make cosmetic promises, and then leave. The European summers were supposed to be warm, pleasant, and sunny, but now it's all very unpredictable. A lot of Italians say that they used to have 4 distinct seasons, but now it's hard to say. Consider what happened to us. We landed in Bari, expecting sunny weather. But what did we find? Rain clouds and showers. And this is what climate change is doing to places around the world.